Tonight, Canada commits to a massive increase in military spending. The high price of strengthening ties and appeasing the U.S.
Together with our allies, we must ensure that NATO remains strong.
While the Secretary General tries to clarify what he called Donald Trump.
He called you daddy.
Daddy thing, I didn't call him daddy.
Iranian officials on the run.
I am sure that a lot of them are or will be on their way to Canada.
The investigation into how they got here, despite being blocked. The scary collapse that brought the Senate chamber to a halt. Plus, an unforgettable memory strikes a graduating class. And recognized with honors.
Even now, getting emotional.
Everything I have today is because of this beautiful country, Canada.
The Canadians celebrated for their extraordinary contributions.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. Calling it a turning point for the world, Prime Minister Mark Carney committed Canada to the biggest increase in defense spending since the Second World War, pledging alongside NATO allies to hit new spending targets that will cost billions more dollars a year. CTV's Jeremy Charon starts us off.
A highly anticipated historic sit-down for the NATO alliance started today with a clear message from Secretary General Mark Rutte.
For too long, one ally, the United States, carried too much of the burden of that commitment. And that changes today. President Trump, dear Donald, you made this change possible.
That has been Donald Trump's pitch as he drove the charge to increase the alliance's defense spending pledge.
NATO is going to become very strong with us.
Alliance members making official today what was expected, a new baseline spending target of 5% of GDP to be reached by 2035.
This is a significant commitment in response to significant threats to our security.
The fact that we are doing this today, the fact that we're united, the fact that the United States is fully behind this, the fact that we're working together is going to reduce the threat environment 10 years from now.
3.5% will have to go to core defense spending, with a requirement to spend another 1.5% on defense-related infrastructure investments. Carney says meeting the 5% commitment would mean earmarking $150 billion a year for defense.
So yes, we'll find gaps. We'll be transparent about that. We'll make up those gaps. So the overall context of the net increase in defense spending is much less than the headline from 2 to 5.
But key to today's new pledge from the alliance, a plan to review progress in 2029, ensuring it still meets the needs of the global security landscape. Senior government officials tell us they see an opportunity then to address whether the breakdown of 3.5 and 1.5 could be balanced differently, a change they say could be better for Canada. Omar?
All right, Jeremy, thank you. And the Prime Minister said today paying for that pledge will involve cuts in other areas.
If we are moving to the higher and higher levels of defense spending because that's necessary, then we will have to make considerations about what less the federal government can do in certain cases and how we're going to pay for it.
Carney says many of those decisions will be made towards the end of the decade when the global security situation may be clearer. The Conservatives say they will be watching closely.
Well, this is why we needed a budget. We need to know where this money's coming from. Canadians deserve to know the truth. That those that serve and the Canadian Armed Forces need to have the direction that a budget provides in developing their departmental plans.
The Prime Minister chose not to issue a budget after being elected, but will present one in the fall instead. And NATO's Secretary General had to explain his choice of words during a meeting with Donald Trump on the Israel-Iran conflict.
They've had a big fight, like two kids in a schoolyard, you know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes, then it's easier to stop them.
And then Daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
An interaction both men tried to explain later when asked by reporters.
He likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No, he did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
The daddy thing, I didn't call him daddy. What I said is that sometimes in Europe, I hear sometimes countries saying, hey, Mark, will the US stay with us? And I said, that sounds a little bit like a small child asking his daddy, hey, are you still staying with the family? So in that sense, I use daddy, not that I was calling President Trump daddy.
Rota has praised Trump for getting NATO allies to increase spending. Donald Trump says U.S. and Iranian officials will hold talks next week, and he pushed back on a leaked U.S. intelligence report suggesting American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities may have only set the country back by a few months.
Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out.
The UN nuclear watchdog says it expects damage at Iran's underground Fordo facility is, quote, very significant, but can't know for sure. Iran insists it will not give up its nuclear program, though the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be holding. Meanwhile, hundreds of Canadians fleeing the Middle East are starting to arrive back home. CTV's Heather Wright has more on their journeys.
On Canadian soil after a 21-hour journey home. Tim Payne and Brandon Lucchese landed in Toronto this morning. The Canadian hockey players had arrived in Israel shortly before the war with Iran began.
It was unexpected, it was scary. It was a lot. I thought we were going to be stuck there, so happy to be back home. Yeah.
Like many Canadians leaving Israel, Payne and Lucchese traveled to nearby Jordan and flew back through the capital Amman. And while the country's main airport in Tel Aviv is back to normal operations, airspace in both Israel and Iran had been closed for nearly 2 weeks, further complicating efforts to get Canadians out. Some have been critical of the government's response, calling it too slow. But with advisories in place warning of the dangers of traveling to the region, Canada's former ambassador to Israel says the criticism is unfair.
You have traveled. You got caught up in a difficult circumstance. The government should do everything possible to get you out of the danger zone if they can. But there's no obligation, nor should there be an obligation, for the government of Canada to be paying for people to fly home.
Global Affairs Canada says they have helped more than 600 Canadians leave the region, while many others have left on their own. And while Tuesday's ceasefire has brought some stability to the area, there is still worry.
It's frustrating, it's stressful.
Bahar Motamedian's 72-year-old father is in Iran, and she's trying to get him to Canada. She is a citizen, but he is not. She's hoping this war will encourage the government to speed up efforts to reunite families.
I think that this is the best time that Canada can show that strong leadership and help us bring our families here.
With this fragile ceasefire still holding, both Iran and Israel are turning now to recovery. The 12-day war killed more than 600, according to Iranian officials, while in Israel, the death toll is nearly 30. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. The Canada Border Services Agency has confirmed it is investigating how dozens of suspected Iranian officials have been allowed into the country despite being barred from entering. Here's CTV's Judy Trin.
In this latest conflict, Israel has assassinated top leaders of the Iranian regime. Their concerns, Iranian officials responsible for human rights violations will seek refuge in Canada.
Canada has long been a safe haven for the regime operatives.
Despite a 2022 law barring senior Iranian officials from entering Canada, some are getting in. The latest data from Canada Border Services shows that as of June, 17,800 Iranians were reviewed for inadmissibility. So far, 20 senior officials have been flagged for deportation, and 66 cases are still under investigation.
No Canadian should feel safe when we have people who have been involved in crimes against humanity, in terrorism, in trafficking, in money laundering, living amongst us as if that's normal.
Last year, the federal government designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the elite military unit of Iran, a terror organization.
This action sends a strong message that Canada will use all of the tools at its disposal to combat the terrorist entity of the IRGC.
A parliamentary committee heard there could be 700 IRGC officials living in Canada. Former Justice Minister Irwin Cotler, who's under 24-hour police protection after being put on an Iranian hit list, says Canada needs to do more than just deport.
We have to exclude them from entry and prosecute them where the evidence can demonstrate that, in fact, they are complicit.
Cotler says the information gathered by CBSA can form the basis for criminal investigations into war crimes, foreign interference, money laundering, and terrorism. Omar.
All right, Judy, thank you. Scary moments in Canada's upper chamber today during a debate on the government's legislation for major projects, Bill C-5. Senator Patrick Brazeau from Quebec rose to speak and then collapsed.
Thank you very much. And
a Senate spokesperson says Brazeau had a medical incident. He was examined by paramedics and appears to be recovering. Also in the capital, police are advising residents of a community in the Ottawa Valley to keep their children inside after it's believed a child was attacked by some type of animal.
It was a shock to everybody, and everybody's very concerned, very upset, and they're asking lots of questions about what the heck happened.
The 8-year-old girl went missing Monday evening and was found shortly after midnight with multiple life-threatening injuries. The child is recovering in an Ottawa hospital. A growing measles surge in British Columbia is prompting new warnings tonight. The province has so far avoided a major spread plaguing parts of Ontario and Alberta. But as CTV's BC Bureau Chief Andrew Johnson tells us, low vaccination rates and summer travel could be a dangerous combination.
With students set to bounce into summer vacation, BC's Premier is blunt when asked about the province's growing measles outbreak.
Measles is no joke. It kills kids. It's a preventable disease, and we don't want that to be the story of the summer for our province.
EB's comments come after 17 new measles cases were identified in BC over the past week. Substantial growth in a province that's only seen a few dozen cases all year.
This is the sadly predictable outcome of some recklessness, frankly, on the parts of some politicians in terms of questioning vaccine safety.
Health officials are bracing for a surge in cases as vacationing families hit the road and potentially fuel spread between communities. Exposure warnings from the BC Centre for Disease Control are already pointing to travel being a risk, with people who recently sailed on ferries between Metro Vancouver and Victoria being asked to watch for symptoms. It's a situation leaving one infectious disease expert stunned.
This is astounding. This breaks my heart. As far back as the turn of the century, we had declared measles as eliminated in Canada, controlled in terms of local transmission. Vaccination rates have decreased in the province of British Columbia from 90% as recently as 5 or 6 years ago down to 70% and 50% or less in some parts of the province. That's what's driving this.
Every infection in BC and close to 90% in Alberta have been in unvaccinated people. Measles is extremely contagious and can linger in the air for up to 2 hours after an infectious person leaves a space. It can also be tricky because early symptoms resemble a cold days before the telltale rash sets in, so people can be spreading it without even knowing it. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Vancouver.
A stormy end to the school year for 8th graders at a London, Ontario school when lightning struck during the graduation ceremony. That was the moment the bolt hit South Collegiate Institute and cracked the chimney. No one was injured, but the building has been structurally compromised, and the ceremony was moved to another school. Wildfire evacuees in parts of Saskatchewan are finally able to return home, and we're getting some new insight into the economic impact of the cost of previous wildfire seasons and what it means for those living through it right now. Here's CTV's Allison Bamford.
This is at the cabin, yeah.
Faded memories of a family legacy that's no longer standing.
It is total, utter devastation.
Wildfires destroyed Doug Swiderski's cabin at East Trout Lake, 3.5 hours northeast of Saskatoon, a place that had been in his family for decades.
There was an old cabin there. When Dad retired, we tore it down and built a new one for him and Mom to retire up there.
Damage and length of evacuations are two factors considered in new Statistics Canada data looking at how wildfires impact the economy. On a national scale, effects are quite small. Business in wildfire zones made up less than 1% of total GDP in 2023, with the exception of the Northwest Territories, where fires threatened nearly 75% of economic activity. At a local level, the potential impacts are much greater. Last summer, Jasper's local economy was effectively shut down during evacuations, with a third of the town site destroyed.
Lots of stuff Dad handmade.
For the Swiderskis, much of their loss can't be measured. The home away from home eventually became Doug's permanent address and the final resting place for his parents' cremated ashes.
And there was nothing that we could do to get in there to get them out.
The Swiderskis sifted through piles of rubble to find what was left of the previous urns.
That is Dad's new box. And his ashes are now in there. And that is Mom's new box.
It could take 18 months for another cabin to be built. Once that happens, Doug's parents will be placed there, back at the site where the family legacy all started. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
From wildfires here to a major deluge in France, Paris has been hit by a major summer storm. Wind and rain lashed the French capital as heavy storms struck during a heat wave, washing out roads and subway stations. Watch as the Eiffel Tower slowly disappears from view as the clouds roll in and thunder and lightning strike. At least 8 people were killed and dozens wounded in clashes with police in Kenya during anti-government protests. It comes on the one-year anniversary of anti-tax demonstrations in which 60 people were killed.
The mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism and to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party.
And a stunning political upset in New York City where upstart politician Zoran Mamdani declared victory in the Democratic primary for mayor. The 33-year-old Democratic Socialist defeated former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was trying to kickstart a political comeback. Mamdani will take on incumbent Mayor Eric Adams in an election on November 4th. And if he wins, he would be the city's first mayor of South Asian descent, its youngest, and the first Muslim to lead America's largest city. Coming up.
It's a wall of heat and stench that hits you.
Inside one of Canada's oldest and most notorious prisons and the struggle to replace it. A scathing report by a government watchdog says Ontario's correctional system is in drastic need of overhaul.
We're finding people housed in broom closets and former pantries and stuff. So the system has deteriorated and it's in crisis.
The Ombudsman says his office has launched an investigation into an incident at the Maplehurst Correctional Complex after a guard was assaulted in 2023. Video obtained by the Toronto Star and shared with CTV News shows inmates being stripped to their underwear with their wrists bound with zip ties. The mistreatment was serious enough to warrant the sentences of some inmates being reduced or stayed. One of the most notorious prisons in the country is one step closer to being shut down. The rat-infested facility is older than Canada itself. Here's CTV's Garrett Barry.
After decades of debate, this bucket is the closest thing to a new provincial prison complex in St. John's that we've seen so far.
Despite the inflated price tag and challenge, I call it, we remain steadfast in our commitment to getting the project done.
Set to replace a decrepit Her Majesty's Penitentiary where staff have complained about rodent infestations, mold, odors, extreme heat, and regular lockdowns.
When you walk in the summertime in particular, it's a wall of heat and stench that hits you.
Conditions so bad inside, multiple offenders have received additional time credited against their sentences for living through it. Defense attorney Aaron Breen says tensions are boiling inside and it's near impossible to leave the prison in a better state than when you entered.
Physically and mentally, it is an excruciating, almost torturous ordeal in terms of the conditions, the air quality, the heat, the temperature.
So the question isn't why this prison is being replaced, it's why it's taking so long. The last attempt to replace this prison stalled when costs came in well over estimates. Officials blamed inflation then and now, and the price of this project has continued to climb. The current design in this area is set to cost almost $700 million, mostly borne by the provincial government, but with the $150 million to be kicked in by Ottawa.
It has always been a difficult priority politically. It is a hard sell for a lot of people, and quite frankly, that doesn't make it any the less important.
The full and final contract to build this new prison still hasn't been signed, and there is no firm commitment on when prisoners might start to be transferred. Breen says until the new facility is well underway, it's hard to trust that the project will be complete. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
Still ahead, the call of the wild in Alberta. We've got some wild video to show you now of a surprise encounter with a moose. Calling it a Canadian safari, a Vancouver woman captured this up-close interaction with the animal while driving through Jasper National Park last week. And check out the reaction from her South African husband sitting in the passenger seat.
Dallas Mavericks select Cooper Flagg from Duke University.
18-year-old Cooper Flagg was selected first overall by the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA draft. He's the second youngest #1 pick after LeBron James in 2003. Still ahead, recognizing the pride of Canada at a special ceremony. Dozens of outstanding Canadians were honored today in a special ceremony at Rideau Hall. Orange Shirt Day founder Phyllis Webstat was recognized with the Meritorious Service Cross for her work helping Canadians understand the impact of the residential school system.
Even now, getting emotional, it's not easy telling my story over and over, but I know it's teaching a lot of people about what happened to us.
Also honored with a Meritorious Service Medal, Toronto Argonauts legend Mike Pinball Clemens and his wife Diane for their extensive charity work.
It's a real treat to be, well, beside my bride. I believe that I get too much credit, right? So whenever there's an award that recognizes both of us, right, I love it.
Toronto Raptors superfan Nav Bhatia got the same medal for his work helping kids from low-income communities.
Everything I have today is because of this beautiful country, Canada. And this is just my way of giving it back to the community, to the country which has given me all.
Congratulations to everyone. And that's a snapshot of this Wednesday for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Good night and see you tomorrow.